I think this is the question we ask. Where's God? I think that the answer might be closer than we think. Because whatever our circumstance, wherever we're born into, whatever people, friendships, parents, family, circumstances, opportunities in life, we're not in control of these things. Where's God? Maybe God's over there. Maybe God's in Israel. Maybe he's only for those people that have certain connections. Maybe he's for the church people. Maybe he doesn't apply to regular, simple life. Maybe I just didn't get a chance to find that level of fulfillment. Maybe I'm just destined to live things out with the questions without answers. Maybe I'm just not one of the lucky ones. In 1961, Bruce Olson went to, he had read about this tribe of indigenous people from the northern area of South America, crossed the border between Venezuela and Colombia, and in the newspapers it was coming up that the oil companies were losing explorers, geologists and engineers and other people who were trying to go out because this tribe of people, he calls them the Modelones, the conventional what are those? It's not an archaeologist, anthropologist, thank you. The conventional anthropologists called them the Bari people, B-A-R-I. And white guys come in there, they just kill them. They just had no desire, no interest in interacting, no interest in seeing the oil companies come and use their land. So Bruce heard about them, and he thought, this is where I need to go. Bruce was 19. He flew over there without any funding, landed in Caracas or somewhere close by, and started asking questions. Where are they? How do I get there? And people thought he was crazy. He eventually found his way there, and they shot him. He was white. He was blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy from Minnesota. Skinny, tall, probably about my height, but thinner, real thin. Went there, they shot him. They shot him in the leg. Got an infection. They drug him into one of their homes, and amongst the Modelone culture, you don't kill something that's naturally going to die because it will curse your own arrows. And your arrows are what feed your people, your family. So you don't let your arrows get cursed. So if something's naturally going to die, you let it die. So they shot him. Looked like he was going to die. So they just drug him into the little place and set him up there to die. Well, he didn't die. He ended up living, and he ended up living for an extended period of time with the tribe in their culture and in their place. This is a story from a book called Bruchko. Some of you may have read it. It's a fascinating story. It's one of the few examples of where somebody from Western society contacted a primitive tribe and did what I consider to be useful work in terms of bringing God to the people in their culture without changing their culture. So Bruce went there, and he lived with them for several years, and he was out one day walking with a warrior friend on a trail, and they heard shouting, hollering. And when they heard that hollering, that's interesting. Oh, we're in the death loop. Here we go. When he heard that shouting and hollering, he said, "What's going on?" And the warrior friend he was with said, "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." So they tried to keep him walking on the trail. They could hear it was off some distance off the trail. And he said, "No, I want to know what's going on. It sounds like somebody's grieving. They're crying out. What's happening?" And the warrior friend said, "No, come on, let's keep going." And Bruce said, "No, I'm going to go see." So he went off the trail and follows the sound, and he gets close there, and he sees another warrior who he's familiar with from another community, who he's familiar with, who has killed multiple white guys, has their teeth around his neck, is quite a skilled warrior from the clan. And he's shouting. He's dug a hole. It's about 6 feet deep, and he's shouting into the hole. And what do you think he's shouting? Does anybody guess? He's shouting, God, if you're in there, come out. God, if you're in there, come out. And one of his companions was up in a tree. And his companion was up in the tree, and he grabbed a bunch of leaves from the tree, and he's stuffing them in his mouth. And he had them in his mouth, and so he couldn't talk quite clearly, but he was shouting, God, if you're in the trees, come, come. See, in Model on Culture, they had had a history, they'd had this legend that they had lost God. They had had a relationship with God, but they had lost him. And now they needed to find him. So every once in a while, when people would be going and they would be calling for God. And so Bruce said, why are you calling? Why is he calling in the hole? And his friend, which he nicknamed Bobby, I can't quite pronounce his name, but that's a simpler way to pronounce it for my tongue. His friend said, where else are you going to look? It's just as good a place to look as any. God could come from anywhere. Like, where is God? We don't know. We've lost him. We've lost him. And I think that in any culture, on any continent, you'll find a similar sense and a similar story. I think that actually in many cases, you'll find it's not just in the continent, in the culture. There's something deep and longing in the human soul, which is, what am I missing? Is there something more? Is there something more than just eating food, going to sleep, worrying about my health or my family or my relationships, or wishing that things could be different? Is there something other than the life I have? So interestingly, the warrior had been doing this for hours and hours and hours and calling. He was getting tired, so he ended up coming over to Bobby and Bruce and talking to them, and they ended up discussing what was going on, and they told about some previous some other Model-owned legends, and one of them was that a yellow-haired guy, a golden-haired guy, was going to come with a banana stalk, and that God was going to come out of the banana stalk. It's okay, Randy, you just take care of your banana stalk and we'll be all right. So they're asking, what's this legend about? What does God have to do with a banana stalk? So Bobby went over and he chopped off a piece of banana stalk, and he said, God comes out of a stalk like this, and he threw it on the ground. And the other warrior just kind of hacked at it with his knife, and it split open. And so it looked kind of like this. Blonde-haired guy carrying a banana stalk was going to bring God to these people. That's what their people had been told. Well, where is God? Some believe that God is in the Orion Nebula. It's one of the most beautiful places in the universe. It's a place of great beauty, and a nebula is an origin of stars, could be an origin of life. Maybe God's in the Orion Nebula. If we could just get there, maybe we could find God. Some cultures believe that God is under the mountain, and that when God gets angry, he or they disturb things and produce great wrath. So maybe God's in the volcano. Is God in the volcano? Is God in trouble and hardship? You may or may not recognize this. This is a painting by a friend, and this is the West Pavilion Road. This is about mile 14 out on the West Pavilion, looking back towards 10 Mile and towards Fountain Ridge and so on. Is God in the Fraser Canyon? Is God in Lillooet somewhere here? Everywhere. Is he? Everywhere. What do you think the banana leaf might be? What's a banana stalk? So when they sliced it open, it separated, and some of the pieces came out like this. And Bruce looked at it and he said, I know exactly what the banana stalk is. God comes out of the banana stalk. They had a prophecy amongst their own people where something, who knows where it originally came from, golden-haired guy was going to come with a banana stalk. And out of that was going to come God. Well, in here, we know God doesn't live in the Bible. We know that this is a collection of people's experiences with God. And we can learn something from people's experiences with God that we can apply to our lives. Because this is just largely a collection of stories and teachings. One of the stories is about Jacob. And somebody's going to have to watch my time here. One of the stories is about Jacob, okay? Jacob was a super privileged guy. His grandpa had amassed a huge fortune. We're talking not millionaire in conventional day and age, because there's lots of millionaires. We have many in town even. We're talking billionaire level. We're talking Elon Musk type relative to the age. Maybe not quite that high, but we're certainly talking Donald Trump type. By that age, his grandpa owned a massive business. They had all the income they needed, to the point where when Abraham had actually gone and rescued 3 kings, he'd gone and rescued 3 kings who had been captured by some other country. They said, look, you get the spoil. He said, I don't need that. I don't need any of the gold or the clothes or anything you've got. I got lots. You guys can go home now. That's how wealthy Abraham was. And when you consider the amount of wealth it takes to rescue nations effectively and say, I don't need payment for that. Can pay for it out of my own pocket. So Jacob was the grandson of a very wealthy businessman whose son furthered the wealth, and Jacob grew up in comfort. Some of us might have grown up in relative comfort. Some of us might have grown up in hardship, so don't worry, there's a story in here for you too. Jacob grew up in comfort and ease. He was dandled on his mother's knees. He was probably spoilt by her. In the culture that Jacob grew up in, there was a rule about inheritance. When the father dies, the certain firstborn son gets the largest portion of the inheritance. Jacob was the secondborn. He was a set of twins. Twins are incredibly close together by genetic. There's a connection that many of us don't understand. That's almost a spiritual connection between these tight siblings. And these siblings were certainly tight. But Jacob was the secondborn, and he was jealous of his brother. And he conspired with his mother to trick their dad, who was blind, into believing that Jacob was the firstborn. So the dad, who was blind, and maybe they had a similar tone of voice, we don't know quite how dad got tricked, but they tricked, such that dad came and conveyed the firstborn's blessing on the secondborn. And when the firstborn heard about it, what do you think happened? Oh, well done, brother. Congratulations. You did such a good job. I'm so pleased that you've... But no way. He was upset. He said, I'm going to kill you. As soon as my dad dies, I'm going to kill you. That way I get it all. Jacob, who loved his parents, loved his mother, was very close to her, he had to run. And when he ran suddenly one night to avoid his brother's wrath, and he just ran and ran and ran. He left with nothing. He'd grown up having everything provided for him, and now he's got nothing. His brother's after him. His father's deeply disappointed in him. And he's potentially never going to see his mother or his homeland again. And he's going into a place that he's never been before, with no known future, no known capacity, and no support network. And he's exhausted that first night, and he lays down on the ground, and he falls asleep, and he has a dream. And in that dream, he meets God. And in that dream, there's a ladder that comes out right beside him, showing him that there is still a connection between heaven and earth. And he sees these beings going up and down on this ladder, and he wakes up and he says, man, that was an incredible dream. And he says, I had no idea God was in this place. God was right here and I didn't know it. I thought maybe it was in the inheritance. I thought maybe it was going to be after I had accomplished some other thing, or I'd done some great thing, or maybe it was off over behind some mountain, or maybe it was under maybe I could just cultivate a field further, and maybe there I'd find God. But I'm out here in great difficulty, and surely God was in this place, and I didn't know it. He thought he was running away from everything meaningful, but he found out God was already in the place he was running away to. God was already in the unknown. God often shows up in our loneliest, most uncertain moments. He's often there. But before we get to our loneliest and most uncertain moments, God's already there. There's another story that I'm actually going to skip because I'm trying to... Oh no, I can do it. I've got enough time here. Okay, there's a story of Moses. Moses is another phenomenal story. Guy is born in a slave household, and he gets adopted by the daughter of Pharaoh. And this daughter of Pharaoh, her name's actually Hatshepsut. For those of you who are interested in finding out who she was the most powerful female in Egyptian history, Queen Hatshepsut. And she had somehow conspired had been set up to become the next pharaoh, female pharaoh. Yes, indeed, it happened. Hatshepsut was using Moses. Hatshepsut, it seems, was barren, was unable to bear children herself, so she adopted this slave child so that she could gain the honor, because only a woman who bore a son could become the next pharaoh. So, she goes away for a while. She comes out, she says, hey, I had a son. And now they can't figure out how to tease that one apart. So she's on the track to become the next pharaoh because nobody can challenge her in public because that would be too dishonoring, and it's difficult. Her and her brother are in this contention for pharaoh. It ends up her brother does actually become pharaoh, and he's the one who chases Moses away. But Moses grows up in the pharaoh's household. I mean, we're talking a king's household here as well. I mean, this is servants are all over the place, and it's you know how well built those structures were back in the time. We can't do much better today. Something happens and Moses is banned. He murders somebody. He's banned from the kingdom. He's chased to the wilderness. Moses thought that he was a privileged one of God, but he's banned to the wilderness and can't stay. Have you ever felt that you were privileged and chosen by God? Have you ever felt that God was looking on you and life was just hunky-dory and everything was working out well, and suddenly it's not? That's certainly what happened to Moses. Moses was a complete failure as far as he could tell. So he goes out to the wilderness and he's there for 40 years. 40 years. He's old now. Have you ever felt that life passed you by? That maybe you're just too old. Maybe it's too late. Maybe too much has amassed. Maybe there's too much momentum in this one direction. Moses out there doing his job in the desert, taking care of sheep, and he sees a burning bush. And the bush that's burning is in a huge conflagration. The amount of flame from the size of that bush is totally inappropriate. And he's like, what's going on? Because lightning strikes, we're familiar with that. Lightning's cause fire in the desert all the time. But it's usually not a massive conflagration. So Moses sees that from a distance. He says, wow, that's interesting. And the flames weren't getting any smaller. They kept burning. And the bush doesn't seem to be shriveling up. He can't see the foliage shrinking in. And he says, that's interesting. So he walks over there and God speaks to him. God speaks to him and says, Moses, before you come any closer, take your shoes off. Because you're standing on holy ground. Why is it holy? Because God's there. Interesting, before you get to your hardship, in that hardest place, God is there. That's holy ground. Everywhere where God is holy ground. Because he's there. Treat it with respect. Treat your life with respect. Treat your hardships and your successes and your failures and everything that's in your life with respect. Take your shoes off, because that's holy ground, because God is there before you were there. Because God is everywhere. Moses, a complete failure, has God speak to him, thought his calling and his life was over. God starts it anew. He can do that for you. The banana stalk says so, because he did it for Moses. A regular day, doing a regular task. Maybe he was just working, doing something incredibly routine. Maybe you are. And God can turn your life around. He doesn't need a sacred temple to speak. He can do it in a bush in the desert. He can do it while you're sleeping on a stone and there's nothing else around. Next brief story is about Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of God. He talked with God. God spoke to him. And Elijah could hear God's voice. I don't know how many of you can, but it's rare. Elijah was chosen by God to do an incredible thing in a country that had apostatized. And he was involved in a massive confrontation where there were miracles. Incredible miracles where God's hand was shown. And Elijah thought that that was going to continue, that this was the order of the day, that this was process. Isn't God just the God of miracles every day? But when Elijah was looking for another miracle after a great confrontation on Mount Carmel, there wasn't one. And he was disappointed. And he said, "Where's God?" So he runs away. He's depressed. He runs away and he says, "You know what? My life's not worth it. I'd rather just die." You can see, when you go through periods of great effort and great strain, you can see what happens to the human psyche. We all know the weakness of our own minds and the weakness of our own hormonal system, our thyroid and our adrenaline and our adrenal glands, and et cetera, et cetera. And we can see how often through great effort and fatigue, we can drop down. And that's what's certainly happening to Elijah. He goes into a funk, goes into a depression, and becomes suicidal. And in that moment, he's way out in the middle of the wilderness again, because he's run off. Interesting, God is often found in the wilderness. Sometimes we need to put ourselves there in order to find him. And Elijah's out there, and God speaks to him and says, "Elijah, I'm gonna come talk to you. I'm gonna show myself to you." And there's a huge earthquake. The ground shakes, and Elijah's terrified. I don't know, I've never been in an earthquake, but I've heard that it feels like the ground is liquid underneath you. That would be really destabilizing to my psyche, because if anything was ever firm for my life, it was, when I tripped and fell and smashed my nose. Like it's there. It's not forgiving. It's not soft. Earthquake, God's not in the earthquake. It's a huge, terrible tempest that quickly comes, and whether it's tornado or whether it's hurricane force winds, and God's not in the wind. And there's a great fire that burns through the valley in front of him, and God's not in the fire. And after the fire comes a still small voice. This is in 2 Kings chapter 19. You can read it there if you have some time. It's really interesting. And God is not in the fire. But after the fire, there's a quiet voice. Elijah thought that God was going to be in these great, big, miraculous, powerful things. But God's not in those things all the time. Sometimes God's in the simple things of everyday life, and we just have to listen to the whisper of his voice. What's he saying to you? What's he saying to me every day? Because we know he's talking. We know he's talking. What's he saying? There's this little scripture in Acts 17:27 that says, God has given everybody the structure of their life. He's kind of put them where they're at. He's given them their place. He's given them their time, their window. such that they could seek for him. And everybody seeks for him just like blind people having blinders on, and they're feeling around in the dark, groping as it were, just trying to figure out this life. And he's right there. He's right there. Acts 17:27. I'll actually just read it for you because it's worded a little differently in the scripture than I said it, but I think you'll get the sense. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their time and the boundaries of their residences, that they should seek him, in hope that they should feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he's not far from any one of us. God is right here. He might even be in the Fraser Valley. He might even be here in your life. And we don't know it. So let's listen. Let's listen, because in actuality, when we think about our lives, the goodness of God, the presence of God can be seen. We just have to have new eyes. We just have to have a new perspective. And we could see, like Jacob, wow, God was here in my life, with my children, with my spouse, with my job, with my valley. God was here all the time.